Welcome back to Class Guide, everybody. Today we're gonna be taking a look at the Vanguard, how you can be the most efficient Vanguard, the most deadly Vanguard of your choice, the subclass abilities, and some of the Vanguard details. So let's get right into it. So when you first pick Vanguard, you have three subclasses here again. You have the Devastator, the Raider, and the Ambusher. Now, choosing between these three classes depends really on how you like your playstyle. So before we look at each separate subclass, let's look at the overall stats of the Vanguard. Each class has the same amount of health and stamina. The Vanguard seems to be the class that has the most stamina out of all the classes, and it's very durable. Now, apparently it is very weak to ranged attacks, but I'll tell you one good thing about the Vanguard a bit later on. We can see that the Vanguard has 130 health. The Devastator in particular has a bone-crushing offensive power specialized on close quarters melee combat. And with the Devastator you get some really heavy hitting weapons, and I highly recommend playing the Devastator quite a lot until you get the Greatsword. The Greatsword is a lot of fun, and the Executioner Axe. A lot of fun, a lot of depth and heavy hitting power. And if you get even further, you can get the Highland Sword, which is that massive sword that we used in one of the videos previous. I'm going to leave it in the top right corner. And that sword was very powerful, has a really long reach, but it's very slow wind-up time, but it's definitely worth using. Now, if we look at the Devastator also has some shake weights, as I usually like to call them, but some throwing items. These things are really powerful against knights. It does a lot of damage, and it does do a lot of damage against most classes in general. So if you land your hits with these little shake weights in people's heads, you're gonna dish a lot of damage. If you go to the Raider, you can see that the Raider has two primary slots. And by the way, all the weapons, we might go into more detail in another video about what's the best weapon to use in what situation. You can see here that, for example, some weapons will have extra damage against certain classes. Now, keep this in mind when you're fighting. Maybe you see a lot of knights one game, maybe you want to pick a weapon that does extra damage to knights compared to footmen or other vanguards. But overall, if you're playing a Vanguard, you will do a lot of damage nonetheless. The Dane Axe is one of my favorites, along with the Executioner Sword, or the Highland Sword should I say, and the Great Sword. Those three are really great. The Executioner Axe I meant, not the Highland Sword. The Raider is really strong in the way that you can throw one of your main weapons and still have one on your back. And this makes it so that you can dish out a shit ton of damage in the first opening blow of combat. And then if you kill your enemy, you can retrieve that weapon again and have two weapons. And if you're really cheeky and you kill an archer, you can have a bow and a melee weapon. So you can be a little bit ranged, and then you can also be very deadly close combat. You can also see that the Raider has the Warhorn as an ability. This heals people in the nearby area. I forgot to say that the Devastator has a firebomb, which will put things on fire and burn people. You want to use the firebomb in like close quarter spaces where it's hard to get around, or in a big group of enemies and toast as many of them as you can. It will net you a lot of points and a lot of takedowns if they do die. The Warhorn, on the other hand, really good to get a lot of points if there's a big battle going on and you're in the middle of all your teammates that are injured. You can blow your own horn and people will be healed, and people that are downed will be revived. You can also see that the Vanguards have a very special ability called Leaping Strike. That means that if you build up a lot of momentum, you'll be able to press Q and leap forwards and dish out a shit ton of damage. Now, hitting this Leaping Strike will also charge special ability, and Leaping Strike charges are probably one of the most fun ways to kill people, and sometimes the bodies will go pinging off into the distance, and you will laugh your ass off because it's really hilarious. Oh no, the Ambusher should I say, it's more of like a stick behind, try to sneak around and attack people, throw some weapons at them, and his special ability is to refill his throwing knives. And this means that you can constantly throw throwing knives for a long time, but the Ambusher has some interesting bonuses. 50% bonus damage from behind when using their native weapons. So that means if you use the weapons that they are on the character itself, you'll be able to do more damage when you're behind people. And 25% bonus damage with projectile headshots, which means that if you hit your throwing knives in people's heads, you'll do 25% more damage than, let's say, a knight. And this is pretty important because you might, if you're very accurate, I wouldn't really recommend playing the Ambusher. I'm not very good with them personally. I prefer the Devastator or Raider, as they both have some longer reaching weapons. And it's very fun to chase down archers. If you have the greatsword and you're playing the Devastator, archer hunting is basically one of your main objectives, because you'll knock him out in one go. And if you end up in a big fight, you'll have enough reach and damage to take on all people at the same time. By the way, a quick little interjection here in the middle of the video. If you haven't already, be sure to tune in to the live streams we do here on YouTube. We're going to be giving away some Chivalry 2 Steam keys, so if you don't have the game already, be sure to tune in. You might have a chance to win a Steam key, and I'd love to see you in the live stream. Thank you very much. The link is in the Discord, and it will probably be on the YouTube channel. If you have notifications turned on, you'll see it there as well. Now, playing the Vanguard in general can be a little tricky sometimes. You might be a little tanky and have a lot of stamina, but mastering how your playstyle is a little bit difficult. Now, I have some tips on how you can play a Vanguard a little cheesy in team objective to get a lot of kills, a lot of points, and a lot of XP. Now, if you're playing, for example, the Devastator or Raider, and you run around your teammates and build up your sprint attack so you can do your leaping strike. You can then try to get behind the enemy, do a leaping strike, do a huge amount of damage, get back again, build up that speed, and then run in their backlines and do the same thing over and over again. Now, this sounds a little cheesy, and it is very cheesy. In the middle of a team objective maps, a lot of people get, caught up in fighting 1v1s or fighting people. While if you play a little clever, you can do a lot of extra damage, do a leaping strike, maybe do some swipes, get out of there, and then do it again. And repeat the pattern over and over again, and you'll rack up kills faster and faster. And if you see an exposed archer, this is almost a free kill if you're playing the Devastator or Raider, as you'll just run up to them, sprint attack, do the leaping strike, and bam. Most of the time, if you're using a heavy enough weapon, they will die immediately. They won't even have time to pull out their weapons unless they see you coming and they prepare for your inevitable collision with their innocent soul. Other ways to play the Vanguard can be to just be a little passive and play with your reach. If you're playing the Devastator or Raider, you'll have a decent reach with your weapons, and you don't have to get too close to people, so if you're fighting shielded opponents, you can kind of keep your distance and keep hammering down on their shields and blocking until they lose their weapons and shields, and they cannot longer block your abilities and attacks. Remember that when you're in the Vanguard role, you will have the advantage in stamina, so if you're fighting an enemy and you riposte, just be sure that they don't counter you too much, as they will regain and keep their stamina as a bonus for doing a counter. So if you're fighting somebody, counter them and try to play with your reach. And the heavier your weapon is, you can actually drag with the weapon. So for example, if you're playing the Devastator and you're using the greatsword, it's a slow, hunky weapon, but it does a lot of damage. So if you do a heavy attack, you can almost do a little dragging, if you know what dragging is. Basically, let's say you swipe to the right with your weapon, but you slowly turn a little bit left, so you kind of delay that hit on the right side where your weapon is going to kind of drag and confuse your enemy. Or you can accelerate and turn towards the enemy as you start your attack and try to hit the weapon onto your enemy before they even realize that you've started your attack. Just an FYI, if you're using heavy weapons, be sure that don't morph too much when you're in combat. That can be a downfall. If somebody is using a small, like one-handed sword, and you're doing like a swipe and then you're going into an overhead, they might have the ability to stab you before you get your overhead done. So you gotta keep an eye out on what your enemy is doing. I'd say kicking and using a little fist to punch them with your weapon is a good way to keep them off their toes so they don't get too comfortable with you with your heavy, sluggish weapons. If you found any use of what's going on here, be sure to leave a like, subscribe with those notifications turned on, and until next time, what class do you want to see? Tell me in the comments. And are you new to Chivalry 2? Is there anything you want to know more depthy about, like weapon damages, what's more valuable? This is kind of just a class guide on how you can play the Vanguard most efficiently, and, well, hopefully you learned something new. I've been the Hurricane Turtle, and until next time, you better have subscribed, or else I will leaping strike you into the wall.